Black woman denied first-class seat. 45 minutes later, she grounds the entire airline. You need to step aside. This section is reserved for premium guests. The words hit Lena Brooks like a slap, not because of what was said, but because of how it was said, cold, clipped, and loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. She stood at the edge of the first-class cabin of Solara Airlines Flight 92, holding her ticket, her leather duffel slung neatly over one shoulder. "I am a premium guest," Lena replied calmly, her voice smooth but firm. "That's my seat, 1A. The flight attendant, a young woman with a polished bob and the kind of practiced smile that never reached her eyes, didn't even glance at the boarding pass Lena extended. "There's been an adjustment," she said, already motioning for the next passenger. "You've been reseated to Economy Plus. Please cooperate." Passengers behind Lena began to shift and sigh, annoyed at the delay. A man in a tailored suit, standing a few feet back, loudly cleared his throat, muttering something about people not knowing their place. Lena held her ground. "Why was I moved? I paid full fare. No upgrades, no discounts. This was booked 3 weeks ago." The attendant finally took the pass, looked at it briefly, then at Lena. "Like I said, ma'am, there's been an adjustment. No apology, no reason, just a brush-off." Lena's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what this was, but she also knew how to pick her battles, at least for now. She turned, walked back toward economy, aware of every pair of eyes watching her, not all of them sympathetic. The seat she was reassigned to was 23D, next to the lavatory. A narrow middle seat crammed between a teenager chewing gum too loudly and a man already asleep, elbow drooping into her space. 45 minutes later, the plane still hadn't moved. Engines quiet, passengers restless, cabin crew murmuring nervously into their radios. Then came the captain's voice over the PA, awkward and tight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're currently waiting on a security clearance. Please remain seated." Lena's lips curved into the faintest smile. She unlocked her phone, glanced at the message she'd sent the moment she sat down. "Flight 902, Solara Airlines. Situation confirmed. I'm in." What no one on that plane knew was that Lena Brooks wasn't just a passenger. She was the Director of Compliance Oversight at the Federal Aviation Ethics Commission, a division powerful enough to ground a fleet. And Solara Airlines had just made a mistake that would cost them everything. 10 hours earlier, Lena sat in a small, windowless conference room in Washington, D.C., reviewing a spreadsheet littered with red flags. Dozens of complaints filed by black passengers flying Solara Airlines over the past 2 years. Downgraded seating, missing upgrades, unexplained cancellations. "I'm going in," she had told her assistant Noah, while scrolling through a particularly damning report where a woman and her son were split from their assigned seats and placed at the back of the plane. Noah frowned. "They're denying most of it, saying it's booking errors, algorithm mix-ups." Lena looked up, her eyes sharp. "Algorithms don't mix up this consistently. I want to see it, feel it, as a passenger. No badges, no titles, just me, the seat, and their reaction." That's how she ended up on Flight 902, alone, dressed in a simple navy blouse and dark jeans. Nothing flashy, no federal ID visible, no fanfare. She expected microaggressions. What she didn't expect was to be outright ejected from first class. Now, back on the plane, she watched the crew squirm. The lead flight attendant, Brenda, whose name she now remembered from the boarding gate, was in a heated discussion near the front. Something about clearance codes, about delays from the tower. Then Lena saw the captain walk down the aisle toward her. She straightened as he stopped at her row, crouching slightly. "Miss Brooks?" "Yes?" I've just been informed who you are." The man was pale, shaken. He lowered his voice. "We received a call from the Department of Transportation, and then from a Washington office." Lena remained silent. "I deeply apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. We'll be relocating you back to first class immediately. Her eyes narrowed. Is it still available? Yes. We removed the passenger who took your seat. There's also a statement being prepared. We'd appreciate if you'd consider— I'm not here for statements, she interrupted. I'm here for accountability. Around them, passengers had gone silent, their eyes shifting curiously. Lena stood. Let's go. As she walked back up the aisle, this time with the entire plane watching, Brenda stepped aside like a ghost. No eye contact, no smile. Lena sat down in 1A, crossed her legs and pulled out a small notepad. She started writing. Dates, names, actions, everything. The flight eventually took off 20 minutes later, but the damage had been done. Back at headquarters, Noah's phone was already ringing non-stop. That night, news broke on social media. A tweet read, Black woman denied first-class seat without reason. Turns out she's a federal aviation official. Airline now under investigation. It went viral within an hour. Lena's name trended by midnight. But Lena wasn't reading the comments. She was drafting a report. And in it, she included one chilling sentence that would shake Solara Airlines to its core. Systemic bias detected not as anomaly, but as operating standard. This was only the beginning. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Local news, cable networks, social media. But Lena Brooks ignored them all. She sat quietly at the breakfast nook in her modest DC brownstone, stirring a cup of black coffee as if the entire aviation industry hadn't just ignited overnight. Noah burst through the door like a man escaping a house fire. Lena, you're on CNN, MSNBC. Someone even posted a TikTok video of the captain apologizing to you mid-flight. It's got 2 million views already. She didn't look up. And he dropped his phone on the counter, screen up. And Solara just suspended their VP of Customer Relations. Brenda, the flight attendant who booted you, was placed on administrative leave. This is spiraling fast. That's not the goal, Lena said, finally meeting his eyes. We don't want heads rolling just to satisfy the internet. We want change. Noah nodded, but clearly didn't agree. Still, this is big. The DOT's asking if you want to lead the task force. They're giving you everything. Full audit access, public hearings. Hell, you could run the entire domestic oversight board after this. Lena leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. I'm not interested in titles, she said. I'm interested in impact. A moment of silence passed between them before Noah broke it. They're scared, Lena. For once, the people who make decisions at 30,000 feet are actually nervous. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and slung her bag over her shoulder. Good. Let's make them sweat. As they exited into the gray morning light, Lena's phone buzzed, an email from a woman named Rochelle Mendoza. The subject line, My mother's story. Lena opened it as they walked. The message was short, but the attached photo sent a chill down her spine. It showed an elderly black woman in a wheelchair, clutching a boarding pass. Next to her stood a Solara gate agent, visibly annoyed, while 2 white passengers were led to the front of the line. The timestamp was from 6 months ago. She was refused pre-boarding, Rochelle wrote. They said she didn't look disabled enough. Lena stopped in her tracks. This is exactly what they don't want the public to see, she murmured. Noah leaned over her shoulder. That's not just bias. That's cruelty. Lena replied instantly. Can we talk today? By noon, she was sitting across from Rochelle in a quiet cafe near Union Station. The woman's voice trembled as she recounted the humiliation her mother had endured, ignored, belittled, forced to walk to her seat despite recent knee surgery. Her mother passed away 3 months later, not from the incident, but Rochelle said she was never quite the same afterward. They treated her like an inconvenience, Rochelle said, tears welling. Like she was disposable. Lena reached across the table, her voice steady. She wasn't, and she won't be forgotten. That night, Lena compiled 10 similar cases. each story more disturbing than the last. A single father separated from his children on an international flight. A black veteran accused of forging his ticket. A nurse forced to miss her connection after being randomly selected for additional screening 4 times in one day. This wasn't isolated. This was a pattern. The next morning, Lena walked into the Department of Transportation's central briefing room, where 20 federal and legal advisors were already seated. Some knew who she was. Others only knew the stories that had erupted online in the last 24 hours. She dropped the thick stack of files on the table. We need an immediate suspension of discretionary reseating policies across all major carriers, she began, and we're opening a formal investigation into Solara Airlines, effective immediately. One older man in a gray suit raised an eyebrow. On what authority? Lena didn't blink. On mine. Noah smiled at that. The room went silent. Then the woman from the DOT's Office of Civil Aviation Rights spoke up. You've got our backing. Whatever you need. As Lena exited the building later that afternoon, she passed 2 young interns, whispering excitedly. One turned and asked a little shyly, "Are you really the one who grounded Flight 902? Lena paused, gave a small smile. No, they grounded themselves the moment they decided someone like me didn't belong up front. The story kept growing. By the 3rd day, Lena's inbox had flooded with testimonials. Most came from passengers of color. Others were from staff, current and former Solara employees, who admitted to being pressured into manipulating seat assignments or ignoring complaints from less profitable passengers. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Ava Carter, a former Solara senior flight scheduler. She asked for a private meeting. Said she had something that couldn't be emailed. Lena agreed. They met in a dim cafe in Arlington. Ava looked nervous, constantly checking the door. There's a quota, she whispered. It's not official, it's not written anywhere. But it's enforced. Too many upgrades to certain demographics? You get flagged. Pushback from supervisors. Cut hours. Lena's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Can you prove it? I kept a journal, Ava said. Every flight I scheduled, every time I was told to balance the cabin optics. I didn't know who to tell, until now. Lena exhaled. You just did. As Ava slid a worn leather notebook across the table, Lena knew this was the break they needed. This wasn't just about one flight anymore. It was about dismantling an invisible system. One lie at a time. The storm was just beginning to brew. While Lena sat in her office that morning, the walls practically buzzed with the energy of incoming tips. The anonymous hotline had been activated only 12 hours prior, and already over 160 complaints had poured in. Noah scrolled through a database of entries, his eyes narrowing with each new story. They called this woman priority baggage, he muttered. In the log, can you believe that? That's how the gate agent referred to her because she requested wheelchair assistance. Lena didn't flinch. She just stared at the whiteboard across the room, covered in notes, arrows, and pinned photos like a crime scene out of a political thriller. It's all connected, she said quietly. Language like that doesn't just appear. It's nurtured. Outside, reporters were camped out on the sidewalk. Lena's name was now more recognizable than several federal transportation officials. She wasn't trying to be a hero, but the system had offered her no choice. Her phone buzzed again, another email from Ava Carter. Subject line, Internal Docs, you need to see this. It was a scanned image of a Solara Airlines employee training manual, confidential and heavily redacted in parts, but one paragraph stood out like a punch to the gut. Maintain a brand-forward cabin environment. Prioritize customer categories aligned with preferred demographic optics. Lena read it 3 times, bile rising in her throat. Preferred demographic optics. Jesus, Noah whispered. It's corporate speak for racism. Lena stood up, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. Where are we going? Noah asked, chasing after her. To Capitol Hill. Inside a conference room deep in the Department of Transportation building, a task force of high-level officials sat in wait. Lena walked in with a fire in her step and dropped the printout on the polished wood table like it was a weapon. "We're past talk," she said. "This isn't about a few bad apples or miscommunications. This is systemic." Senator Elaine Granger, a staunch aviation oversight advocate, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we open a full congressional inquiry?" "No," Lena said, locking eyes with her. "I'm demanding it." The senator didn't flinch. "I'll sponsor the motion, but be ready. Once this starts, there's no walking it back." Lena didn't hesitate. Good. Later that day, Lena was approached by someone she didn't expect, Matthew Sterling, a clean-cut former Solara executive who now worked with a private aviation consultancy. He found her outside the building and flagged her down like he was chasing a cab. "I have something for you," he said, "but it comes with risk." She studied him carefully. "Are you here to clear your conscience?" He exhaled. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just sick of pretending this industry isn't broken." He handed her a flash drive. "What's on it?" "Seating algorithms, internal memos, meeting recordings, everything." She slid the drive into her pocket. "If this is real, it's game over." "Oh, it's real," he said, voice dark, "and it goes all the way to the top." The data was explosive. The memos clearly detailed meetings where high-level Solara executives instructed staff to quietly reassign first-class seats to more market-friendly passengers. The rationale? They didn't want black or brown faces representing the airline in customer-facing social posts. They had actually been tracking passenger demographics for Instagram aesthetics. "This is war," Noah said. Lena nodded. "Then we'd better prepare to win." That night, she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by papers, digital files, and her own exhaustion. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she started typing a public statement. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't bitter. It was a déclaré. She posted it at 11:47 p.m. "To those who've been told you don't belong, you do. And I promise, this time the door doesn't just open, it stays open." Within minutes, it went viral. The next morning, Solara's CEO, Martin Whitaker, released a carefully worded video apology. But it was too late. The public didn't buy it. Too many stories, too much evidence, too much pain. Lena's name had become more than a headline. It had become a symbol. Meanwhile, inside Solara HQ, panic was setting in. In the executive boardroom, Martin paced in front of a large screen. "We need a scapegoat," he said to his legal team. "Someone we can throw under the bus." "Brenda Monroe is already gone," someone said. "Then dig deeper. Find someone else. We can't let this touch the board." Across town, Lena prepared for her next move. A congressional hearing had been scheduled for the following week. Cameras would be there, so would survivors, and Lena would be testifying under oath. But she wasn't afraid, she was ready. Because for the first time in a long time, the people who had been silenced were finally being heard. And Lena Brooks? She was going to make sure they never got ignored again. The congressional hearing room was packed to capacity. Reporters filled every inch of the press section. The general public, some waiting in line since dawn, crowded the gallery. It felt less like a government proceeding and more like the Super Bowl of justice. And Lena Brooks sat calmly at the center of it. But beneath her polished appearance, navy blazer, white blouse, hair in a perfect twist, her nerves pulsed with the weight of what was about to unfold. Beside her, Ava Carter adjusted the stack of documents they were submitting. Across the aisle sat Solara Airlines' legal team, surrounded by assistants and consultants. And at the edge of the table, almost buried in the corporate pile, sat Brenda Monroe, the former flight supervisor who removed Lena from the plane. Brenda kept her eyes down, her hands clenched. Lena didn't glance her way. She didn't need to. Brenda would face her reckoning soon enough. The chairwoman of the Senate Transportation Subcommittee banged her gavel, and the room fell into a hush. We are here today to investigate reports of discrimination and misconduct by Solara Airlines and its senior leadership, as alleged by Ms. Lena Brooks, and corroborated by numerous witnesses and internal documents. Lena was the first to speak. Her voice was steady. "I didn't come here today to be pitied," she began. "I came because for every time someone says, 'We're reviewing the situation,' someone else is being humiliated at 30,000 feet. She paused. "I was denied a seat I paid for because someone thought I didn't look the part. Then I was removed from the flight under the pretense of being disruptive, when all I did was ask, 'Why?'" Gasps echoed softly from the audience. Since then, dozens, no, hundreds have come forward with their stories. I'm just the one you happen to see. But this is bigger than me. As Lena continued, she presented documents, employee chat logs that casually mocked customers, algorithm designs used to prioritize certain demographics, and most damning of all, an audio recording of an executive meeting where Martin Whitaker said, "Brand identity must reflect aspirational optics, not statistical diversity." One of the senators leaned into his mic. "Ms. Brooks, to clarify, are you saying Solara Airlines maintained an unofficial policy of removing or downgrading passengers based on their race or appearance?" "Yes," Lena said, unflinching, "and I have proof." The hearing erupted. Flashbulbs exploded from every direction. Reporters scrambled to live tweet. The chairwoman pounded her gavel again. "Order!" On the other side of the room, Martin Whitaker's expression shifted from arrogant calm to white-knuckled panic. His legal counsel whispered rapidly in his ear, but Martin just stared at Lena, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Then it happened. Brenda Monroe stood up. "I'd like to say something." All heads turned. Martin muttered, "What the hell is she doing?" Brenda's voice trembled but held weight. "I was wrong. I didn't know who Ms. Brooks was when I asked her to leave the plane, but that's not the point. I didn't need to know. I made a judgment based on her skin, her confidence, her presence, because I'd been taught, subtly, implicitly, that some people don't belong in first class." She turned to face Lena. "I'm sorry." A hush swept the room. Lena stared at Brenda. Then she nodded once. Not forgiveness, not approval, just acknowledgement. The chairwoman took back control. "We will move forward with a full investigation and recommend immediate suspension of Solara's federal subsidies and travel contracts. Further action, including criminal referral, will be considered once we review the remainder of the materials." That evening, news outlets ran wall-to-wall coverage. Solara stock plummeted by 23%. The CEO was nowhere to be found. And Lena? She went home to a modest apartment and sat in silence as she watched an anchor refer to her as a civil rights icon of the skies. But Lena didn't care about titles. She picked up her phone and called her mom. "You watching?" "You already know I am, baby," her mom replied, choking back tears. "You changed something today." Lena smiled faintly. "I hope so." As she hung up, a new call came in. No caller ID. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Brooks, this is Deputy Secretary Monique Reyes from the U.S. Department of Transportation." Lena sat up straighter. "We'd like to speak with you about leading a civilian advisory board on airline equity reform." The secretary was extremely impressed. Lena took a breath. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, if you're available. In Washington." Lena smiled. "I'll be there." Across the country, millions of Americans had watched her story unfold. Some were outraged, some inspired, but everyone, even those who doubted her, couldn't look away. And at Solara Airlines HQ, Martin Whitaker was summoned for a final emergency board meeting. The verdict was swift. He was removed as CEO by unanimous vote, As he packed his things in stunned silence, a security guard stood by. "You know," Martin muttered, "I built this airline." The guard just shrugged, and she grounded it. 45 minutes of arrogance had cost them everything. And Lena Brooks? She was just getting started. The private boardroom on the 31st floor of Solara Airlines' corporate headquarters had seen its fair share of crises: missed quarterly goals, PR blunders, union negotiations, but never anything quite like this. Martin Whitaker, still impeccably dressed in a custom navy suit and crisp white shirt, stood in front of the wall-size screen, his jaw clenched, as national news replayed Lena Brooks' Senate testimony on a loop. "She came in too clean, too calculated," he muttered. "That was no fluke. She's had this in motion for weeks." Across from him, Chief Legal Officer Glenn Parker rubbed his temples. "You're missing the point, Martin. It doesn't matter if it was orchestrated. What matters is we're bleeding in the court of public opinion, and Congress is circling like sharks." "Then get them off our back," Martin snapped. "Isn't that what we pay you for?" Glenn raised his eyes. "We're past that. The only thing we can do now is damage control, maybe cut a deal with her, issue a statement, offer a token donation to some diversity initiative. Anything to stop this from becoming a federal case." Martin's hand slammed against the table. "We're not bowing to her, not to some woman who snuck her way into a seat she didn't deserve." A silence fell. That's when Vice President of Communications Natalie Sung cleared her throat. "Martin, the public doesn't agree with you. Lena Brooks isn't just any woman. She's a former Air Force pilot, a Harvard-trained attorney, and, according to the White House's new release, a special advisor to the DOT. Martin blinked. "She what?" "She's not just a passenger with a complaint. She's part of a federal initiative. They've known who she was all along." "That's impossible. Why wouldn't they tell us?" Glenn's voice was bitter. "Because you let her get dragged off a plane in front of a dozen witnesses and 2 security cameras. If they told you then, you would have buried it." The screen changed again, now showing a satellite image of Solara's fleet grounded at LAX due to unforeseen operational disruption. Natalie scrolled on her tablet. "She's not just grounding us in the media, Martin. This morning, 3 FAA inspection teams walked into our maintenance hangars unannounced. 3. That's not a coincidence. That's coordinated." For the first time, Martin faltered. His face paled. He sat down slowly, his bravado cracking. "We underestimated her." Glenn stood. "You insulted her. Publicly. That clip of you calling her a brand misalignment has gone viral. She doesn't need to expose us. You did that yourself." Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., Lena sat in a quiet conference room inside the Department of Transportation. Ava was beside her, flipping through more steez. They'd been there since 7 a.m. preparing documents for the next wave of audits. The door opened and Deputy Secretary Monique Reyes walked in. "You made quite the impression yesterday," she said, offering Lena a firm handshake. "Our phones haven't stopped ringing. Public support, congressional inquiries, even a few corporate whistleblowers inspired by your testimony." "I didn't plan to become the face of this," Lena replied, "but now that I am, I won't waste it." Monique nodded approvingly. "Good. Because the president wants you to lead an independent civilian task force to help draft new federal regulations on airline anti-discrimination policy." Lena blinked. "That's huge. You've earned it." Lena took a breath. "Then let's do it." That afternoon, the Solara Board of Directors convened in emergency session. The meeting was closed door, but words still leaked. Whispers of internal panic, of investor rebellion, of resignation letters drafted but not yet sent. Later that evening, Martin tried to preempt the storm with a press conference. In front of cameras, flanked by his legal team, he delivered a cold, rehearsed apology. "We recognize the importance of every passenger's dignity and experience. We deeply regret the recent events and are working toward a resolution. But the media wasn't biting. Reporters shouted questions. Why was Lena Brooks removed from the plane in the first place? Do you deny the existence of internal messages mocking black passengers? Why haven't you stepped down yet? Martin dodged, deflected, fumbled. And just before the cameras cut off, a protester in the back shouted, "She grounded your whole damn airline in 45 minutes." The crowd erupted. Back in her apartment, Lena watched the broadcast with Ava. "You think they'll make him resign?" Ava asked. Lena sipped her tea. "They won't have a choice. The system protects itself until it can't. Right now, he's a liability." Ava raised an eyebrow. "And you? What are you?" Lena smiled faintly. "I'm the consequence." Just then her phone buzzed. A text from Monique Reyes. "Stay ready. White House wants to meet tomorrow." Lena put the phone down slowly. Everything was accelerating now. Bigger than one airline. Bigger than one man's ego. She stood, looking out the window at the city skyline, lit by the orange glow of dusk. "You coming?" Ava asked. "Yeah," Lena said, "just thinking." A beat passed. "You know what's funny?" Lena said. "They all thought they were punishing me by kicking me off that plane. And," Lena's eyes narrowed with quiet fire, "they gave me the runway." The media frenzy wasn't cooling down. It was only intensifying. Every hour brought a new headline. Brooks strikes back. Senate to review airline bias claims. White House silent. For now. Cable pundits screamed across split screens, dissecting the incident from every angle. Lena Brooks's name was now more than a trending hashtag. It had become a movement. But none of that was what made Martin Whitaker lose sleep. What haunted him was the silence. Not from the media, from Washington, because silence from Washington meant planning, and planning meant consequence. At Solara Airlines' headquarters in Atlanta, Martin paced the executive suite. Every other minute he peered at his phone, waiting for the call he knew was coming. And then it did. His assistant peeked through the frosted glass door. "Line 2, the secretary's office." Martin picked up immediately, his voice forced calm. "Whitaker here," a clipped female voice responded. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Deputy Chief of Staff Elaine Moss. The Secretary of Transportation will be addressing the press at 2 p.m. Eastern. You may want to prepare a statement of your own." Martin swallowed. What exactly is being addressed? A pause. The FAA's recommendation to suspend Solara's operating license pending a full federal investigation into discriminatory practices and safety protocol violations. His stomach dropped. "You can't be serious." "We are. This isn't about one incident anymore. You've triggered a broader reckoning. You should have de-escalated when you had the chance." The line went dead. Martin stood there, phone still in hand, staring out the window like he could will the sky to stop collapsing around him. Meanwhile, across the country, Lena stood backstage at Georgetown Law. A panel on corporate ethics had invited her as keynote speaker. The air buzzed with anticipation. But her focus wasn't on applause. She scanned the notes in her hand, then folded them and tucked them away. She didn't need a script today. She stepped to the podium. "For years, we've heard the same lines. It's an isolated incident. That's not who we are. We'll do better." But I wasn't denied a seat because someone made a mistake. I was denied because the system believes some people don't belong in certain seats. And I'm not talking about airlines. I'm talking about power. The audience leaned in. Phones captured every word. I was removed from that plane like a problem to be discarded. But what they didn't realize was, I knew their playbook. I helped write parts of it, and I came prepared, not just for myself, but for the next woman told she's too loud, too ambitious, too black for the space she's earned. Applause erupted, but Lena held up a hand. "Let me be clear, this is not vengeance. This is accountability, and accountability is not optional anymore. It's overdue." As the crowd rose to their feet, somewhere deep inside Solara's PR war room, Martin's team watched it all unfold on a muted live stream. They looked at him, waiting for orders. Martin exhaled sharply. "Schedule a meeting with the board today." "Full board?" his assistant asked. "Everyone. Legal, comms, risk. We're in survival mode now." Back in D.C., Lena exited the auditorium into a waiting black SUV. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She picked up. "Ms. Brooks, this is Senator Karen Lowry. I'm heading a bipartisan review committee on corporate discrimination. Would you consider briefing us this week?" Lena didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." The line clicked off. Next to her, Ava stared, half stunned. "You're building a congressional case against them?" "No," Lena said, staring out the window. "I'm building a blueprint." The car pulled into her apartment garage, but as they stepped out, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Detective Reuben Daniels, the same officer who had helped her get information on Solara's legal history weeks ago. He looked nervous. "I shouldn't be here, but you need to know. One of your old pilots, Captain Jenna Foley. She's blowing the whistle, said Solara's been suppressing internal complaints for years. They have a whole blacklist system coded into their booking software." Lena's eyes narrowed. "Proof?" He handed her a flash drive. "Plenty." Back upstairs, Lena and Ava plugged the drive in and opened the files. Internal emails, HR reports, booking codes labeled RSL for risk-level passengers, most flagged for no other reason than attitude or difficult behavior. Names overwhelmingly skewed toward non-white passengers. And then they saw it, one name tagged as removed from upgrade list permanently. Lena Brooks. Ava laughed bitterly. "They tried to erase you from their algorithm." Lena leaned back, a slow, fire-lit calm spreading across her face. "Then I'll rewrite their system." Later that night, Martin sat at the long mahogany table in Solara's boardroom. The lights were low. His legal team was pale. His CFO had his resignation letter half-drafted. One of the board members leaned forward. "This doesn't stop with media. This is legal now. This is federal, and you put us here." Martin slammed his hands on the table. "I did what was best for the brand." "No," the board member snapped. "You did what was best for your ego." Silence. "Effective immediately," she said coldly. "The board is voting on your removal as CEO." Martin opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. Across the city, Lena stood quietly on her apartment balcony, watching the lights of planes cross the sky. Somewhere up there, the very system that tried to push her out was now collapsing under its own weight. Ava brought her a glass of wine. "Are you ready for what comes next?" she asked. Lena stared at the skyline. "More than ever." The next morning, Lena Brooks stood in the marble-floored lobby of the Department of Transportation, her black suit sharply tailored, hair pulled into a low bun, presence impossible to ignore. Every passing official, intern, and security officer glanced at her with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. No one dared to approach her. She didn't have to speak for the room to understand she wasn't there to play games. Inside the hearing room, cameras flashed as government officials, aviation executives, and legal analysts filled the seats. This wasn't a trial, but it might as well have been. Ava leaned over and whispered, "You sure you want to go in alone?" Lena's voice was calm. "I've been alone in boardrooms where no one expected me to speak. This time they'll have no choice but to listen." The door opened. Senator Karen Lowry, mid-50s, whip-smart silver-streaked hair, rose to greet her. "Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming." "I didn't come for a thank you," Lena replied. "I came to finish what they started." Senator Lowry offered a thin smile. "Let's make history, then." Inside, Lena took her seat beside a placard bearing her name. Across from her sat Robert Colfax, interim CEO of Solara Airlines, hastily promoted after Martin Whitaker's sudden resignation the night before. He looked stiff, eyes darting toward the press section as if searching for a safe exit. Lowry struck the gavel once. We're here today to determine the extent of corporate malfeasance, discriminatory practices, and regulatory violations by Solara Airlines. Ms. Brooks, you have the floor. Lena adjusted the microphone. There's a pattern here. She began. It didn't start with me, and it won't end with me unless this committee is willing to act. She produced printouts from the drive Detective Daniels had given her. Whistleblower reports, internal memos, codes used to flag passengers. They didn't just humiliate me, they coded me, labeled me a risk because I asked for the seat I paid for. That same system has denied upgrades, removed passengers from flights, and marked people as threats, without due process, without recourse, all based on race, gender, or perceived attitude. Low murmurs rippled through the room. Colfax's lawyer cleared his throat. These allegations are serious but unverified. The previous administration built that system, Lena interrupted, and your client benefited from it. She slid a document forward, including a performance bonus clause tied to keeping first class in line with brand image. You know what that means, Mr. Colfax? He didn't answer. Lena leaned forward. It means fewer black faces in row 1. A gasp, flashes, chaos. Lowry banged her gavel again. Order, Colfax fumbled. We never approved those terms. They're in your internal audit, Lena said, lifting another sheet, buried under market segmentation optimization. You didn't have to approve it. You knew it was there and looked the other way. Lowry's face turned steely. Ms. Brooks, what outcome are you seeking? Lena didn't blink. Full investigation, suspension of Solara's booking system, criminal review of discriminatory coding, and a mandate that any airline operating in this country be required to publish transparent passenger treatment audits quarterly. Colfax leaned into his mic. You're asking us to dismantle decades of airline policy over one mistake? No, Lena said flatly. I'm asking you to admit it was never a mistake. She stood up. Eyes sweeping the room. This is bigger than me. It's about every person ever told to sit down, shut up, or move back because they didn't fit somewhere. This is where we decide if the system protects comfort or justice. The room erupted into applause, not from politicians but from the citizens and observers in the gallery. Later that afternoon, Lena stepped outside into a flood of microphones. A reporter shouted, Ms. Brooks, what do you say to those who think you're doing this for attention? She didn't pause. I already had attention. I came for accountability. That night, Solara's public relations team scrambled to control the damage, but it was too late. News outlets replayed Lena's testimony on loop. Social media exploded with clips, breakdowns, hashtags like Audit the Airlines and our Seats for Justice trending across platforms. And in homes across the country, people, flight attendants, ticket agents, pilots, and passengers began sharing their own stories. One by one, the curtain lifted on a system designed to favor some while quietly excluding others. Meanwhile, in a quiet hotel suite just outside D.C., Martin Whitaker sat alone, watching Lena on television. Her face was calm, her words precise, but her eyes blazed with something he recognized too late. Conviction backed by strategy. His phone rang. It was his attorney. The DOJ just called. They're opening an investigation into Solara's hiring and passenger profiling, and they want to talk to you. Martin laughed bitterly. They want to talk to me. She made herself untouchable. She won. The lawyer hesitated. She didn't just win. She changed the rules. Miles away, Lena sat with Ava in her living room sipping tea. You think this actually changes anything long-term? Ava asked. Lena exhaled. It doesn't end with a hearing. It ends when women like us don't have to fight to sit where we belong. Ava smiled softly. And if they still try to block the seat? Lena looked straight ahead. Then we build a new plane. The sun hadn't yet risen over Washington, D.C. when Lena Brooks stood before the nation. CNN, MSNBC, local affiliates, all broadcasting live from the National Press Club as the Department of Transportation prepared to announce its official findings. Rows of chairs were filled with reporters, policymakers, pilots' unions, and airline executives, all anxiously waiting. The tension in the room was electric. No one knew what was coming next, but everyone knew who had caused it. Lena wore a navy blue blazer with silver trim, her signature look. Behind her stood Ava, Detective Daniels, and a small coalition of whistleblowers from across the country. Men and women of all backgrounds, ticket agents, mechanics, cabin crew, who had stepped forward after her testimony. The Secretary of Transportation stepped to the podium. Good morning. As of 8 o'clock a.m., the Department of Transportation is suspending Solara Airlines' national operating license, effective immediately, pending a full review of internal passenger tracking systems, hiring discrimination, and retaliatory terminations of whistleblowers. Gasps echoed. Phones lit up. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the weight of it. The secretary continued. This investigation began with the wrongful removal of a paying passenger, Ms. Lena Brooks, from a first-class seat she rightfully purchased. What has since been uncovered exposes systemic misconduct reaching every level of the airline's operation, and that is unacceptable. Martin Whitaker, the former CEO, watched from a small TV in a conference room across town, a federal agent standing by the exit. His palms were slick with sweat, but that wasn't the ending. When Lena took the stage next, the room fell silent, not because of her title, but because of what she represented. I didn't set out to bring down an airline, she began. I boarded that plane as a woman, a professional, a citizen who simply expected what I paid for. A seat. The difference between that expectation and reality wasn't money. It was perception. A perception rooted in bias, empowered by silence, and protected by outdated systems no one dared to question. She let the weight of that sit before continuing. I was denied a seat, but what really happened that day was I was told I didn't belong. And for too long, too many of us have internalized that message, on planes, in boardrooms, in classrooms. So today, I say this to every person who's ever been dismissed, ignored, or told to move. You do belong, and your story matters. A beat passed, then applause broke. Not the polite kind, but the thunderous, foot-stomping kind that shakes a room. As the press conference wrapped up, reporters clamored to get statements. One asked, Lena, do you think grounding the airline is enough? She smiled softly. No, justice isn't about shutting things down. It's about opening eyes. It's about building better systems, ones that don't just look good on paper, but feel right in people's lives. That evening, news anchors called it the Brooks Effect. Social media trended with videos of people recounting their own travel discrimination stories. Activists began drafting legislation. Airline executives scrambled to overhaul training, tech, and policy. But for Lena, the real victory came quietly. As she walked through Reagan Airport days later, incognito in a hoodie and jeans, she stopped to help a woman struggling with her toddler and carry-on. The gate agent smiled at them both. Warm, respectful, present. When Lena handed the child's stuffed elephant back to the mom, she whispered, Safe travels. The woman looked at her. Wait, are you... Lena just winked. Let's just say I'm a fan of first class. She walked on, not needing to be recognized, because the change had already taken root. And in her phone's inbox, a message sat unread from a young woman who had watched the hearings. It read, I never thought I could speak up, but because of you, I did. Thank you. Lena smiled, put her phone away, and disappeared into the crowd. Because sometimes the biggest victories don't make headlines. They make people brave. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something you or someone you love has faced, We want to hear from you. Leave a comment, share your experience, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every voice matters, and together we make change louder.